So thanks for coming, everybody who wouldn't rather have had lunch than listen to this. So this talk has been prepared in the last few days because what it is hopefully going to give you a little idea about what happened at the UnVoxxed unconference, which we held on Monday and Tuesday this week. And so Mark Hazel, the guy who organises Devoxx, asked me to talk about the things we learned about programming at any scale, which was the theme of the unconference. And so the first thing I think I need to do is give you a tiny bit of background. Who are UnVoxxed? So UnVoxxed is pretty much, if this works, is Dick Wall, who you guys might know from the JavaPosse Roundup and the JavaPosse. Me, because I went to the JavaPosse Roundup a few times. And then Dick and I, plus the organising committee from Devoxx across the world is kind of what makes up UnVoxxed. So that's what UnVoxxed is. The first thing that I learned, that we learned from Dick and I putting on the unconference was that, and you can see the asterisks whenever you see them, are lessons learned. We thought people would come because they knew what an unconference was and that they would come to it for that reason. It turns out we learned afterwards that most people came because it was £150 for 2 days for a conference. So what I want to do first is explain, because it's quite easy to sell to your boss, the first thing I wanted to do is explain what an unconference is. The easiest way to do that is to say what an unconference doesn't have. So an unconference doesn't have speakers, and it doesn't have any PowerPoint. So some people think there's, what's left. If you took the speakers and the slide decks away from Devoxx, there'd not be a lot left. But what it does have is a venue, a theme, which is programming at any scale, and delegates. So that was our venue. We were actually in the crypt, so we weren't in the church. We were underneath the church in Camberwell Green, so not very far away from here. There's the delegates, or some of the delegates, standing around talking about stuff. And from those things, the venue, the theme, and delegates, sessions, hackathons, and lightning talks just appear. So obviously they don't just appear, but what do we do? So what we do is, when everyone first arrives, this is the Tuesday agenda as it looked at the start of Tuesday. But the first thing on the Monday, Dick does an introduction. But if you look on the unvoxxed.com website, you can kind of see what Dick covered basically. But it's the rules, what an unconference is, why people were there, which was obviously, by the sounds of it, a surprise to some people because they might have thought there were speakers and slides. And then people are just invited, there's slots, they're invited to put down things that they would like to talk about on Post-it notes, and they put them up on the screen. So you can see some of them are, like that's messaging microservices, API documentation. That was, I think, pragmatic versus mathematic. This one was beyond timeouts, better distributed fault finding, and lots of stuff. So some stuff people had thought about because they didn't know what an unconference was, and they'd had a bit of a think, and they were like, this is a thing I want to discuss with people. Other stuff people just thought of. So because this is totally dynamic, as the 2 days proceed, more sessions come up, sessions are moved around, people merge sessions, people think, I don't want to talk about that anymore because we half talked about it here, but I do want to talk about this. And then that's what a session looks like. So you sit down in a circle, as big a circle as you need or as small circle as you need, and people the person who's put the talk forward proposes the talk and kind of says why they are interested in talking about it and maybe where they come from, 2 to 5 minutes. And it just opens it up to the group. And then people just discuss stuff. And it sounds very Californian and touchy-feely, but it works fantastically well. Ditto for hackathons. So here's some of us doing a hackathon. People just proposed hackathons. And lightning talks. So I've seen Will now. The thing I was going to ask you to send me, Will, was a screenshot from your lightning talk, but I forgot. So what did we learn in the 11 minutes I've got left? So I should have 30 seconds per thing. Number one thing that seemed to come out of this for me, and I think everybody will come out of it with different stuff, is that asynchronous message-driven microservices might be coming down the pipe at people. People are doing them, but they're not the ones you hear about. The ones you hear about are the RESTful, stateful, request-response type microservices. Again, this seems to be leading people towards that people are thinking about and worrying about and considering how they would do this, and it looks like they're going to have to do things like CQRS, and event sourcing, which is something that Daniel Bryant mentioned in his talk earlier. If you get into this, One other thing that we discussed to a certain extent, or quite a bit, was that back pressure is something that you can really, if you're in a message-based architecture, if you're using something like akka or whatever, applying back pressure is something that's really quite easy to do, and if you can do it, then it means that you can prevent yourself being DDoSed, and you can kind of spread load more effectively, and you can move from like a pull model to a push model, or sorry, a push model to a pull model, dynamically as load increases and decreases and things, and so lots of the infrastructure worries that you would normally have get handled for you. That's if you know about back pressure and if you know what it is and you know how to kind of architect for it and build on top of it. So we had kind of discussions about all of that kind of stuff and use of feedback loops and all that kind of thing. Another thing that we discussed, which again, you don't typically tend to hear talked about a great deal, but was idempotency. So, you know, the ability to handle at least one of a request. You know, so you'll hear about lots of things when you hear about microservices and distributed systems. What we kind of seem to agree on was that you don't typically hear a great deal about idempotency. So that was something that we talked about. And around things like if you were, for example, in a horizontally scaled microservice architecture and you want to know about idempotency, different ways of you know, if I've got 3 microservices, all of which are listening to a set of kind of I need to remember the request that I've been sent, and if it's a similar request, I need to send the response back. Suddenly I seem to have like a clustered state across my machines if I want to remember those requests, because request 1 might come to a microservice A, and request 2 for the same thing might come to microservice B, because it's round-robin load balanced. But then I need to have state, right, because both of them need to know about the same request. So there's ways of handling that, and we talked about things like that. Another thing that seemed to come out of things, because again, so I personally, and I think other people as well, we're moving towards the fact that lots of people are still figuring out exactly what goes into a microservice and how, when it's a good idea to connect microservices together, when it's not a good idea to connect them together. One thing that we seem to discuss, at least on 1 or 2, or at least on 2 occasions, was that the independence of microservices, which again is something Daniel said this morning, is more important than being dry at the moment. Maybe, you know, so if you go towards things like domain-driven design, you might have a similar concept, but not the same concept, represented in 2 bounded contexts. That's all right as long as you know why flavor A of it is represented in bounded context A, which is owned by microservice A, and a different one in microservice B. If you know why you're doing it and that they're different distinct flavors as opposed to the same thing that's shared, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. Another thing, possibly because a guy from Rat Pack was in the attendee list, but asynchronous and non-blocking there's a lot of noise about it, but also it seems to be a thing that definitely solves a lot of problems, and as people move towards it and adopt things like Netty and Rat Pack and other stuff, it does seem to be the future. And so there's RX Java came up and stuff. There was also a session on HTTP2 and what the changes that come with HTTP2 would mean for things. So if it's HTTPS everywhere, how can you do all, you know, caching at the front end, because it's all let's come back. Because it's all secure, and you know, if you can keep connections open, is that like a good thing or a bad thing? You know, so I don't just make a request response and then the connection is closed. I can send stuff back down after the fact down the same pipe. So there's lots of discussion about that, and things like futures and promises and programming abstractions over the top of this were discussed quite a significant amount. One thing that struck me, maybe I don't know, Will was there, so I don't know if it struck Will, but I thought everyone would talk about Docker. Docker hardly came up at all. But security in depth was mentioned on more than one occasion. So things like securing your microservices, securing in, conversations between microservices, and as Dave Sire from Spring, the kind of lead behind Spring Boot and Spring Cloud pointed out, there's always a bit somewhere in your infrastructure where you need to have in clear text or somewhere, or something, you know, something that someone can type into a command line or something, the password to let you unencrypt something, to let you unencrypt something, to unencrypt something. And as you pointed out, that's a very difficult problem that nobody really seems to understand. The other one was security in things like Docker and Mesos and Kubernetes and Consul, and the new hotness that everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about using them, but very few people are talking about securing them. So some people are kind of starting to worry about things like that. One thing everybody did agree on, which wasn't a surprise, was that everybody hates Swagger, but almost everybody who has to do some form of documentation of microservices is using Swagger because it's the thing that everybody uses. But we heard about HAL and HAL Browser as well from Dave Sire, who'd been looking at it, and that sounded really cool. So that's about hypertext and things. Got to speed up. And we also heard from Dave that there's soon to be a new Spring REST docs project, which isn't part of Spring, but it's just written by a guy, Andy Wilkinson, which is worth checking out. Apparently it's going to be on GitHub, and it uses ASCII Doctor. We also learned one of the sessions near the end of the second day that there's a lot more Android watches around than you'd think, because I think about maybe 15, 20% of delegates had, which might be a self-selecting group, but there were a lot more than I thought. And one delegate owns 2 Google Glass. So who would have thought that's probably it's Carl, next, not the guy with the glasses on, but the guy next door to the guy with glasses on, actually has 2 Google Glass. In the hackathons, we found there was a bug in the latest AWS CLI, because one of the hackathons was on machine learning. Because we were trying to upload loads of CSV data to Amazon to do machine learning, we discovered, or someone pointed out to us, how you can easily fill an entire column rather than dragging it all the way down to the bottom. You can double-click on the little black box. So some people, that's the biggest thing they've taken away from the conference, because it will save them hours over the lifetime of their career. I personally learned that you can help Dick Wall code up an entire Scala validation framework, which, if you're interested, there's my email address at the end. The talk on Scala this morning, Dick did a very similar thing, but over the space of 3 hours as opposed to over the space of 15 minutes. And it is very exciting, very interesting. We also learned that Spring Boot plus HYPERMEDIA+HAL is probably coming in a Spring Cloud snapshot soon, because they did a hackathon and they added it in about 2 hours. And then Dave Sire did a Spring Boot mime lightning talk, so with no words. That was pretty funny. And this is about I needed Will's slides for. Will, sitting in the back, did a Thrift/Brave kind of distributed tracing lightning talk. That was very cool as well. And again, another take home from me personally was that you definitely need distributed tracing. If you don't, you can't have that kind of across the board view of what a single request at the top turns into in your microservices. Then you're doomed. Second from last. It turns out that 8:50 p.m. is not too late to learn about monoids and functors, although it was a bit cold. So here's us at a restaurant at 8:50 p.m. at night, wrapped up because it's freezing, but we were having monoids and functors explained to us, which was pretty cool. And lesson number 20, with 3 minutes left, we'll be back. So the biggest thing that was wrong with this conference was that I was responsible for marketing, so it was an utter fail on the people knowing about it front. So next year we're going to do a much better job of marketing it. We're going to also, we believe, put it on after UnVoxxed, because we discovered that the thing that you want to do after a conference is go, right, who saw those 3 talks were insane, but what happens when that's put on my architecture? And Unconference is amazing for that kind of stuff, because you can play those things through with people who may have been at the talk, people who haven't been at the talk, and loads of stuff. So if you would like, or if you know anyone who you think would like to be on the list to be early access announcement for the next one, you can email me, andrew@harmel-law.com, or follow me, L94781, or at UnVoxxed, or at Dick Wall, although Dick's a bit intermittent on Twitter, so he might not notice. And that's it. Has anyone got any questions? Yeah, how many people there? So 12. That's my marketing fail. So that was what was good was so apparently Bruce Eckel, who kind of in the IT world seems to have popularised this. 8 is the minimum that you need, because otherwise you just kind of everyone's a bit too scared to talk to each other. So it was 12, and it was so. What was interesting to me was because I've been to the JavaPosse roundups got bigger and bigger, and I've been a few times. The smallest I've been to, I think, was like 25. And I was wondering if it would work a bit smaller. It totally did. It still had that kind of feel of communication and collaboration, and there was enough people from enough different places that there was a real conversation, and a lot of people going, yeah, but that, how does it work for me? But it scales up to apparently 80 to 90 people. So we could totally, it can't go as big as Devoxx. Because that's exactly, so it splits. So apparently then it turns into multiple unconferences, which is, that's not a problem to have. So. But I would encourage it. It sounds, like I say, it's very touchy-feely. For me, it's the best thing you can do. It's not to slag off Devoxx, but it's even better than Devoxx, because you make it. It's what you want it to be. But if you could have it after Devoxx, so all the stuff you learn here, it's amazing. It's like plus on top of like multiplicative on top of the conference. I think. Any other questions? So I'd encourage you all to come, because we could more than double the numbers if everybody came. Before it gets too exciting, and then you can say you were like at the second ever one. So that's it. Time's up. Thanks very much.